My name is Marlene Navarro. I'm 28 years old, and for the past several years, my life has revolved around one mission: keeping my younger sister, Caroline, afloat. Not because she asked for help humbly, and not because our parents ever discussed it with me. It was simply assumed that I would sacrifice everything for her future while pretending I didn't have one of my own. That assumption became the quiet backbone of our family, and for years, I accepted it. I worked two jobs: day shifts at a printing shop and graveyard shifts at a 24-hour grocery store. I'd come home with blistered feet, numb fingers, and a sleep-deprived headache that pulsed with every heartbeat. But I kept going because I believed it would all be worth it someday. That someday, Caroline would graduate, thank me, and build a life she could be proud of. And maybe, just maybe, I would finally get to live mine. I paid for everything she needed and everything she claimed she couldn't live without: tuition, textbooks, rent, groceries, utilities, and even the money she insisted she needed to look presentable at school. Meanwhile, I was rationing meals, patching up old shoes, and sleeping on a mattress I found on a curb. But the true wound wasn't the money, it was the indifference. Caroline never once asked if I was okay, if I ate, if I slept, if I was drowning under the weight of her bills. She treated me like I existed solely to swipe my card on her behalf, and the more I gave, the more she took. Designer handbags, new shoes, expensive makeup, fancy brunches. She flaunted it all online. People in the comments called her lucky, spoiled, glamorous. I was the invisible engine powering her life, and she never even acknowledged it. I tried to be understanding. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she had a part-time job. Maybe it was all for appearances. Maybe she appreciated me, but didn't know how to show it. But one day I asked gently, "Did you get a job? Your lifestyle seems comfortable." She didn't even look up from her phone. "Everyone at campus dresses like this, Marlene. I don't want to look poor." I felt something inside me twist, tight and painful. Our parents weren't any better. Anytime I tried to open up about my struggles, they shut me down with the same line every single time. "She's your sister. She's building her future. You should be proud you can help her." Proud, as if pride could pay my overdue electric bill. The real breaking point came when she called me, excited and breathless. "I'm applying for a study abroad program. It's super competitive, but I'll get in. You should start saving. They want the deposit soon." I stared at my cracked kitchen tiles, too exhausted to feel anything but disbelief. "Caroline, I can't pay for that. I'm already barely keeping up." She let out a sarcastic laugh. "Oh my God, Marlene, don't be dramatic. This is an investment. You should want to support me." Want. As if everything I'd done so far was a choice instead of an obligation shoved onto my shoulders. I said nothing, but inside me, something small and fragile began to fracture. It finally shattered at a family dinner a few weeks later. We were all seated around the table, my parents, Caroline, and me, trying to have a rare, peaceful evening. Caroline took over the conversation immediately, describing the luxurious European cities she planned to visit, the charming apartments she expected to live in, the stylish outfits she'd buy to blend in. "And Marlene's paying," she said casually, gesturing toward me like she was pointing at a servant. Laughter, actual laughter. I sat frozen. "I never agreed to that," I whispered. Caroline gave me a smirk, dripping with condescension. "Don't be bitter, Marlene. Just because your life isn't going anywhere doesn't mean mine has to stop." My mother nodded. "She's right. You work, you earn. Why wouldn't you support her? She's young. She needs a chance." I waited for someone, anyone, to see how their words cut me open. But no one did. The silence inside me became unbearable. I stood up so abruptly my chair scraped the floor. "You know what?" My voice was steady, too steady. "I'm done." Caroline rolled her eyes. "Oh, great. The martyr speech. You want to know what I've done?" I said, my voice trembling with years of swallowed pain. "I've worked myself raw to support you. I've paid for every part of your life while mine stood still. You act like everything you have comes from your hard work, but it's paid for by my exhaustion." My parents' expressions faltered. I turned to them. "And you two, did you ever once ask if I could afford any of this? If I was okay? If I needed help? No. You just expected me to keep going. You treated me like a tool, not a daughter." Caroline's face reddened. "You're abandoning me." "No," I said firmly. "I'm finally choosing myself." I placed my chair back under the table, turned toward the door, and without looking back, I said, "Until you all learn the difference between support and exploitation, don't contact me." Then I walked out, and for the first time in years, I felt air in my lungs again. When I left that dinner, I expected anger, coldness, maybe even silence. What I didn't expect was how fast the fallout would hit. The next morning, my phone started vibrating nonstop. 10 missed calls from my mother, 4 from my father, a dozen messages in the family group chat, all of them variations of the same theme. How could you do this to your sister? Caroline is devastated. You embarrassed us in front of the whole restaurant. I didn't answer. For once in my life, I let the calls ring. By noon, my mother finally caught me off guard. I picked up because I thought someone might be hurt. Marlene, she began, her voice sharp. What you did last night was cruel. Cruel. That word struck deeper than I expected. I told the truth, I said quietly. You humiliated your sister, my father chimed in from the background. She was in tears all night. How could you let money come between family? I almost laughed, because if anyone had let money become the center of our family dynamic, it wasn't me. Dad, I said, I've supported Caroline for years. I've paid for her tuition, her rent, her food, her clothes. I've skipped meals so she could eat. I've worked 2 jobs so she could pretend to live a glamorous life online. And none of you ever asked if I was okay. Silence. The first silence I had ever heard from them about this topic. My mother finally spoke, softer this time. Well, we didn't know it was that much. Of course they didn't. They never asked. I can't keep doing this, I said. I'm exhausted. I'm behind on my own bills. And Caroline's expecting me to pay for a study abroad program. I can't do it. You're tearing this family apart, my father said weakly. No, I replied. I'm refusing to be torn apart. They didn't have an answer for that. When the call ended, I sat there in my dim apartment, surrounded by overdue notices and empty takeout boxes, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt still. Like the noise I'd lived with for years had finally quieted. But peace doesn't last long in families like mine. By the afternoon, Caroline had taken the drama public. She posted a vague, emotional paragraph on social media. It always hurts when the people you trust turn their backs on you. Some people only care about themselves. She added a sad selfie for effect. Comments flooded in. Stay strong, babe. You deserve better. People can be so selfish. People who had no idea I was the one paying her entire cost of living. Then things escalated. Caroline created a fundraising page titled Emergency Support Needed, claiming she'd been blindsided by an unexpected financial crisis, adding a dramatic story about an older sibling refusing to help during a crucial moment. There was no mention of the thousands I'd already paid, no mention of the luxury shopping sprees I'd funded unintentionally, no mention of the truth. But the universe has a strange sense of justice. The donations barely trickled in. A few $5 contributions, a single $10 one. Nothing close to what she expected. Apparently, strangers weren't interested in funding a study abroad dream disguised as a tragedy. Still, she kept posting, getting more dramatic with each update, screenshots of her bank account, cropped pictures of her crying, quotes about betrayal and family. I watched it all unfold silently, no longer surprised. One night, after a long shift, I got a text from someone unexpected. My boyfriend, Daniel. He and I had been seeing each other quietly for a while, mostly because I never had the time or energy for a real relationship, but he knew just enough about my situation to understand the weight I'd been carrying. I saw your sister's posts, he wrote. Are you okay? I stared at the screen, wondering what it felt like to answer that question honestly. I don't know, I finally typed back, but I'm not sorry for what I did. He replied instantly. You shouldn't be. Setting boundaries doesn't make you a bad person. I closed my eyes, letting that sink in. No one in my family had ever said anything like that. Boundaries to them were an act of war. They wanted me compliant, silent, useful. But Daniel saw something they refused to see, that I was human too. In the days that followed, Caroline's meltdown evolved into a full spectacle. She moved back into my parents' house, and they welcomed her like a wounded hero returning from battle. They cooked for her, gave her cash, drove her to appointments, and even did her laundry again. Watching from a distance, I realized something quietly devastating. Caroline wasn't being punished for her entitlement. She was being rewarded for it. But something else happened too, something I didn't expect. I started to feel free. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing from job to pay someone else's bills. I wasn't waking up with the weight of someone else's dreams crushing my chest. I wasn't living my life according to what others expected from me. I was just living, breathing, thinking. And with each passing day, the grip my family had on me loosened. The guilt faded, the exhaustion softened, the resentment dissolved into something calmer, quieter. But freedom has a price, and I was about to learn what mine would be. The strange thing about freedom is that it doesn't arrive with fireworks or celebration. It comes quietly, like a door finally swinging open after years of being jammed shut. And once it opens, you can't help but wonder why you stayed on the other side for so long. In the weeks after I cut Caroline off, my life felt unfamiliar. I didn't have to check my bank account every hour. I didn't have to pick up extra shifts to keep someone else afloat. I didn't wake up to long lists of demands disguised as urgent needs. For the first time in years, my paycheck belonged to me. My weekends belonged to me. My future belonged to me. But my family didn't see it that way. They kept calling, texting, lecturing, sometimes gently, sometimes with thinly veiled anger. Every conversation circled back to the same message. You need to fix this. You need to help your sister. You're being stubborn. Caroline is suffering. But I wasn't bending anymore. Not when bending had only ever taught them to push harder. One evening, Daniel came over with takeout containers and a quiet look in his eyes that told me he'd been wanting to ask something. "Are you sure you're okay?" he said softly. I had heard that question so many times lately that it almost sounded foreign. But when he said it, it didn't feel like judgment. It felt like care. "I think I'm learning to be," I replied. He nodded, taking my hand. "You deserve a life that isn't built on someone else's expectations." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until it left his lips. Caroline, meanwhile, continued spiraling. Her fundraising page stalled at a pathetic total. She tried posting emotional updates, vague quotes about betrayal, even a dramatic video where she pretended to wipe away tears. None of it gained traction. People had their own problems. They weren't going to finance her lifestyle. She grew more desperate. My parents grew more panicked. And the more they tried to fix everything for her, the more she leaned on them. It became a cycle, one they fed and one she refused to break. Months passed. I found a new rhythm, a new kind of peace. I moved into a small but cozy apartment closer to work. I started budgeting for things I'd never allowed myself before. New clothes, hobbies, decent groceries. I even allowed myself the luxury of downtime, something that once felt impossible. I began feeling like a person again instead of an ATM. Then, one afternoon, my mother called. Her voice was unusually calm, but there was something strained underneath. "Marlene, your sister wants to talk to you." I knew this moment would come eventually. "All right," I said quietly. Caroline got on the phone. Her voice was a mixture of anger, exhaustion, and entitlement that hadn't fully faded. "I can't believe you're still doing this," she snapped. "I need help." I closed my eyes. Not because her words hurt, but because, for the first time, they didn't. "What do you need help with?" I asked evenly. "Everything," she cried. "Bills, tuition, rent. I can't keep doing this. Mom and Dad can't afford it. You know I can't work while I'm in school. It's too much." "So you want me to take over again?" I said. "Well, yes," she said, as if it were obvious. I took a long breath. "Caroline, I love you," I began quietly, "but I'm not going back to that life. Not again. I can't take responsibility for your choices anymore." She went silent, then exploded. "You're selfish. You're letting me fail. You're supposed to help your family." Family, the word that once chained me. Now it simply reminded me of every wound I'd been expected to ignore. "Caroline," I said softly, "helping someone isn't the same as sacrificing yourself for them. I did everything I could for you, more than I should have. Now it's your turn to figure out your life." "You're abandoning me," she screamed again. "No," I said, "I'm giving you the chance to grow up." She hung up on me. My mother called back seconds later, furious, but something in her voice told me that even she was beginning to understand the truth. They had created this version of Caroline, not me. I didn't call back. I didn't explain myself again. I didn't defend my boundaries. I didn't need to. Years passed. Caroline never studied abroad. She never found a stable job. She stayed with my parents far longer than anyone expected, clinging to the comfort they provided and the responsibilities they shielded her from. Meanwhile, my life slowly blossomed. Daniel and I grew closer. I advanced at work. I learned how to enjoy the quiet, steady rhythm of a life that wasn't built on guilt or sacrifice. And one day, looking back, I realized something profound. I had spent so long trying to rescue Caroline that I never noticed I needed rescuing too. Only I could pull myself out of the hole I'd been sinking into. Only I could choose to stop being the foundation everyone else stood on. Only I could rewrite my life. And I did. I didn't get the apology I once dreamed of. Caroline didn't suddenly mature or thank me for everything I had done. My parents didn't fully understand the burden they'd placed on me. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was that I had finally chosen myself. and choosing myself felt like breathing for the first time.